All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today we're tackling Revelation chapter 11.
Ooh, that's a good one.
That's going to feel like a puzzle box to me.
Right.
Like so much symbolism.
Yeah, for sure.
But we've got this online study guide to help us unpack it all.
Okay.
And it's taking a Jewish perspective, which I find pretty fascinating.
Yeah, that's what I love about this source. It brings in that Jewish context, which really helps unlock so much.
Yeah, like I feel like a lot of times we interpret it through like a very like Christian lens, which is fine.
Right.
But to add in like the Jewish layer to it just gives you a whole nother dimension.
Absolutely. It's like understanding the cultural references in a movie you've seen 100 times, you know? Suddenly it all clicks.
Yeah, okay.
And this study guide, it even has this cool Your Nights section, so you can like jot down your thoughts as you go.
Oh, that's awesome. I love when they do that.
Yeah.
And there's also a link to a YouTube podcast called The Olive Grove if you want to like really go deep.
Nice.
Yeah. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's just jump into it.
Sounds good.
So right off the bat, John, who wrote Revelation, he's told to measure the temple of God and the altar. And I'm thinking, measuring, that doesn't sound like the most exciting thing.
Right.
What's the big deal with measuring?
Well, when you look at how measuring's used throughout the Bible, it's often about God claiming ownership or like setting boundaries. And in this case, it's interpreted as God's focus, shifting back to the Jewish people, back to Israel.
Okay.
It's like he's saying, this is mine,
Got it.
and I'm bringing attention back to it.
Okay, that makes sense. But then the study guide also points out that the outer court of the temple, that's not supposed to be measured. It's given over to the Goyim. So that's non-Jews for 42 months.
Right.
And that seems like a pretty big detail to just kind of skip over.
It is a big deal, yeah.
What's the significance there?
Well, this ties into a lot of people think about like the 7-year peace deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so these 42 months of like Gentile control of the outer court, it's thought to represent like the midpoint of this peace deal.
Okay.
Which kind of ushers in this time of like serious tribulation, especially for Israel.
Okay, so 42 months of tribulation. That's
Doesn't sound fun.
yeah, that doesn't sound like a very good time.
No.
And speaking of things that don't sound very fun, in come the two witnesses.
Yes.
These mysterious figures who are going to be prophesying for 1,260 days.
It's a long time.
Or you guessed it, 42 months.
There's that number again.
Sensing a theme here.
Yeah, the numbers definitely have a meaning here.
Yeah.
And while the study guide kind of dives into like who are these two witnesses, like could one be Elijah, there's that verse in Malachi. But then they also point out, Jesus said Elijah already returned as John the Baptist. So it's not so clear. It's like a mystery.
Right. So maybe it's less about like who they are specifically.
Yeah.
And more about like what they represent.
Exactly.
And I think it's interesting that there's two of them.
Yes.
Because the study guide points out under Jewish law, you needed two witnesses for judgment.
Right.
So there's definitely this emphasis on like the divine authority behind their message.
Absolutely, yeah. And the way they're described, they're called olive trees and menorahs.
Yeah, it's a lot of imagery there.
It's very symbolic.
And it's not just random apocalyptic decor.
No.
The study guide connects the olive trees to like spiritual richness.
Mm-hmm.
They even mention the Garden of Gethsemane.
Right, which was known for its olive press.
Right.
And then, of course, the menorahs represent the church.
So these guys are like, they're walking symbols, but they're not just standing around looking symbolic.
Yeah.
They have some serious power. We're talking like calling down fire from heaven.
Oh.
Shutting off the rain, turning water to blood.
Wow.
I mean, talk about special effects.
It's like they have the power of Moses and Aaron all rolled into one, but like amplified. Because the study guide points out that like, Moses and Aaron, their power was tied to like specific plagues,
right?
Specific events. But these guys, they've got like unlimited ability.
Wow.
It's like they're acting as God's direct representatives, carrying out his will on a grand scale.
I mean, they sound pretty untouchable.
Well, that's where it gets interesting, because the study guide tells us that, eventually they are killed.
Okay.
By the beast from the abyss.
A beast from the abyss.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
They're only killed after they've finished their mission.
So they're invincible until their work is done.
Right. It's like they're protected.
That's a pretty good deal.
And the study guide connects this to our lives, you know? It's saying, like, if we're truly in God's will and doing what he's called us to do, we're also protected, you know, until our work is finished.
That's comforting.
Yeah.
But if they are killed, what happens next?
Well, so their bodies, they're left on display in Jerusalem,
Okay.
which the study guide describes as spiritually named Sodom and Egypt.
Wow.
It's a pretty, you know, it's a stark image.
Yeah, not exactly a respectful send-off.
No, not at all. And the study guide contrasts this with the Jewish celebration of Purim,
Okay.
where it's, you know, it's a celebration of victory.
Right.
But in this case, it's the wicked who are celebrating,
Mm.
you know, that the truth has been silenced.
Right, because the two witnesses were calling for repentance.
Right, exactly.
And that, I guess that was tormenting people.
Yeah, well, you know, truth can be unsettling,
Yeah, for sure.
especially for those who don't want to hear it.
Right, right. But then here's where things get really interesting, right? After 3.5 days, the two witnesses are resurrected.
Talk about a plot twist.
I know, right?
The study guide even calls it a party foul.
Yeah, for all those people celebrating.
Yeah, can you imagine the shock?
Oh, man. It's like, you know, God has the final say,
Absolutely, yeah.
even over death.
Yeah.
And then, to make things even more spectacular, a voice from heaven calls them up, and they ascend in a cloud, just like Jesus did.
It's that parallel, you know, it's not a coincidence.
Right.
It's reinforcing that idea that these two witnesses, you know, they're acting as Christ's representatives,
Mm-hmm.
echoing his victory.
And just when you think it can't get any crazier, a massive earthquake hits Jerusalem, destroys 1/10 of the city, kills 7,000 people. I mean, for a book about the end times, there's a lot of destruction packed into this chapter.
Yeah, no kidding. It's a stark reminder of God's power and judgment.
For sure.
You know, the study guide points out that this is like the second woe,
Mm-hmm.
and there's still one more to come, and it's coming soon.
Oh, the suspense. But before we get to that, the seventh trumpet sounds.
Yes.
And heaven is just erupting in celebration.
It's party time.
Yeah. Voices are proclaiming, the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and his Messiah.
The ultimate victory parade.
It really is. And, you know, the study guide, it paints such a vivid picture of this scene with the 24 elders.
Mm-hmm.
They represent the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 apostles. And they're shown falling down in worship.
It's powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Giving thanks that God's reign on earth has finally begun.
Like they've been waiting centuries for this moment.
Yeah, makes you wonder, like, how would you react if you saw all this happening?
Right.
Like, would it be pure joy?
Or a little bit of fear.
Yeah.
A little bit of both, maybe.
Yeah, and the study guide ties us back to, like, the idea of surrendering control to God now. Like, are we living in a way that welcomes his reign? Or are we still clinging to, like, our own desires and ambitions?
It's a good question to ask ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah. And then, of course, we get into the descriptions of the judgments.
Right.
The judgment of salvation and the judgment of rewards for those who are believers.
So the judgment of salvation, that's the final separation, you know, between those who've chosen to follow God
Right.
and those who haven't.
Right. Okay. And what about the judgment of rewards?
So this one is specifically for believers.
Okay.
And it's all about how we've lived our lives for Christ.
So it's not like God's keeping score up in heaven.
You're right.
It's more like, it's more nuanced than that.
Yeah, exactly. It's about, you know, the study guide emphasizes that it's about our faithfulness, you know, not our accomplishments,
Okay.
not our status. It's about like the quality of our hearts
Yeah.
and how genuine our love for God and others is.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we need to take a moment to process all that. We've covered a lot in just the first half of the chapter.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in.
So we'll be back soon to dive into the rest of chapter 11.
Sounds good.
Okay. Welcome back. I don't know about you, but my brain is, it's feeling a little fried after that last segment.
Revelation will do that to you.
It really will.
Yeah.
It's like we need a whiteboard and like a whole pot of coffee just to connect all these dots in chapter 11.
It's a lot, but that's what makes it so fascinating. It makes you think, you know, it makes you grapple with some of the biggest questions we have.
Totally.
You know, good versus evil, judgment, suffering.
Right. And the study guide, it really doesn't shy away from those tough questions. Like they even pose this challenge to the reader. If you could ask God one question about the end times, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one. It makes you really think,
Yeah.
what would I ask?
Yeah. And I think that's the point of Revelation, right? It's not just about like predicting the future.
Right. It's about how we live now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like knowing what's coming should change how we live in the present. Speaking of things that should make us rethink our priorities, let's circle back to those two witnesses for a second.
Okay.
I'm still kind of wrestling with like who they represent, you know. The study guide throws out some ideas, but it never really lands on a definitive answer.
Right. Because it's not about their specific identity. It's more about the symbolism.
Okay.
You know, they embody that prophetic voice, that courage to speak truth, even when it's unpopular, you know?
So, like, they could be anyone who stands up for what's right.
Yeah. Even if it means going against the grain.
Even if it means, going against the crowd.
Exactly. And the study guide talks about how, like, modern day Christians, we can draw strength from that.
Yeah.
You know, we have the authority and the protection of Jesus as we live in a world that, you know, doesn't always embrace our message.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And it's kind of reassuring, especially considering the two witnesses are ultimately killed.
Right.
It seems like standing up for the truth can have a pretty high cost.
It can. But even their deaths, they serve a purpose. You know, it's not a defeat. It's part of God's plan.
Right.
You know, it's part of his ultimate victory.
And we can't forget their resurrection. Like, how insane was that?
It was pretty epic. Talk about a mic drop moment.
Right. And the study guide points out that their resurrection foreshadows our resurrection.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Like, it's this reminder that death doesn't have the final say.
Right. God does.
Yeah. And speaking of powerful figures, we can't forget about the beast from the abyss. That guy's pretty menacing. Like, what's his deal? What's his role in all of this?
Right. So the beast is often interpreted as like the embodiment of evil.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a manifestation of Satan's power.
Yeah.
He represents everything that's opposed to God and his plan.
So he's like the ultimate bad guy.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that even the beast, he's still under God's control.
Okay, yeah, that's a little hard to wrap my head around.
It's a big concept.
Yeah. But if God's in control, why would he allow the beast to kill the two witnesses in the first place? It seems kind of cruel.
Yeah, it's a question that a lot of people have asked, but the study guide offers an interesting perspective. It says, you know, that their death, while it's tragic, it's ultimately part of a larger divine drama.
Okay.
That leads to God's victory in the end.
So it's not just random suffering, like there's a purpose behind it.
Exactly. And their resurrection really, really drives that point home.
Yeah.
It's a powerful symbol of hope and the ultimate triumph of good over evil.
It's interesting, like even in the midst of all this chaos and destruction, you still see this thread of hope running through it.
That's the beauty of Revelation, I think. It doesn't shy away from the darkness,
right?
But it always points to the light.
Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, yeah.
It makes this dramatic appearance in this chapter.
It does.
I feel like we haven't really given it the attention it deserves.
You're right. It's a powerful symbol. The Ark appearing in the Temple of Heaven, you know, it represents the presence of God, his covenant faithfulness. It's a reminder that even when there's judgment, God's promises, they still remain.
And that kind of ties in with that whole description of the seventh trumpet, right? The kingdom of the world becoming the kingdom of God and his Messiah.
Absolutely, yeah. The seventh trumpet, that's a key moment in Revelation.
Yeah.
It's the start of God's reign on earth.
Right.
And the Ark of the Covenant appearing right at that moment, you know, it reinforces that idea that God's establishing his presence.
Yeah.
In a new way.
So it's not just about like destruction and judgment. It's also about this new beginning.
It is.
This new era where God's reign is like fully realized.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's important for us to remember, especially when, you know, things feel out of control in the world.
Man, this whole deep dive is really making me rethink my whole perspective on Revelation.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I used to see it as this scary book. Like almost indecipherable, just like doom and gloom.
Yeah.
But now I'm seeing like the hope in it. The reminder that God's in control.
Right.
And like that call to live faithfully.
Yeah, to live faithfully now, you know.
Yeah.
In the present.
Yeah, exactly. But before we get too carried away, there's one more piece of the puzzle we got to address, the judgments.
Oh, right.
The study guide mentions two types,
Yeah.
judgment of salvation and judgment of rewards.
Right, right. And they're important to distinguish between those. So the judgment of salvation, that's the final separation between, those who've chosen to follow God and those who haven't.
Right. And the study guide makes it clear that judgment isn't about like earning our way into heaven.
Yeah.
It's about accepting, God's grace through faith.
Exactly. It's a gift.
Yeah.
And then there's the judgment of rewards, which is for those who are believers already.
Okay.
And it's all about how we lived our lives for Christ, the choices we made, the impact we had.
So it's less about getting into heaven and more about like what we do once we're there.
You could say that, yeah. It's a recognition that our actions, they have internal significance. And the study guide points out that that our rewards, they're based on our faithfulness, not on, what we achieved or our status.
So it's not about building up our like heavenly resume.
Right, exactly. It's about living a life of love and service.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's definitely something to think about. Man, this chapter has really, really packed a punch.
It has. But I think before we wrap things up for this part, it's important to emphasize that Revelation, even though it can be complex and even frightening at times,
Yeah.
it ultimately offers hope.
Yeah.
It reminds us that God's in control, he has a plan, and he's going to win.
Yeah, that's a good point to end on. And I think this is a good stopping point for part 2. We still have so much more to explore in chapter 11, so be sure to join us part 3. Welcome back. We're finally at the last part of our Revelation chapter 11 deep dive. And wow, this chapter, it's just been like a whirlwind, all this imagery, all this symbolism. We've got the temple measurements. We've got the 2 witnesses coming back to life, earthquakes, the Ark of the Covenant showing up. It's wild.
It's a lot to take in. Yeah, like a Michael Bay film directed by God.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But under all that, like all that spectacle, there's this really profound message there,
Right.
about hope, about judgment, and really about God being in control.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a reminder that God's working everything out, even when it seems chaotic, and he wants us to be a part of his plan.
So I'm curious, like now that we've kind of gone on this journey through Revelation 11, what stands out to you the most? What really stuck with you?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's the faithfulness of the 2 witnesses.
Oh yeah.
They just stood so firm. Even when everyone was against them, even facing death,
Wow.
They knew what they were supposed to do, and they did it. It's inspiring, They just trusted God's plan completely, even when things got really, really tough.
It's both inspiring and kind of intimidating at the same time.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like they set a pretty high bar, right?
They do, but I think that's the point. Like, it's not that we have to be exactly like them. It's more about remembering that we also have that same power within us.
Okay.
We have Jesus's authority. We have his protection.
The study guide makes this interesting connection between like what the 2 witnesses went through and what a lot of Christians are facing today around the world.
Oh yeah, that's a powerful point.
Like, following Jesus, it doesn't always mean things are going to be easy.
No, not at all.
In fact, for a lot of people, it comes with a really, really high price.
Right, yeah, discrimination, hostility, even violence.
Yeah, just for believing in Jesus. It's a good reminder to pray for those people,
Absolutely.
the ones who are being persecuted,
Yeah.
to support them.
To stand with them, for sure.
And then, for those of us who are lucky enough to live in places where we can practice our faith freely, it's a challenge to not take that for granted, to use that freedom well.
Yeah, to be bold, to not, shrink back from sharing what we believe, to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard.
One of the questions that really got me thinking in this study guide was, what do you think the 2 witnesses represent? Like, is it a call for us to be bold, to speak the truth even when it's unpopular?
That's a good question. It makes you really examine yourself.
It does. It does. This whole deep dive has really changed how I see Revelation. I used to just think it was like all about the end of the world.
Yeah.
All scary.
Right.
But now, like, I'm seeing the hope there. And that reminder that God has it all under control.
And that we're part of that.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's been an amazing journey going through this chapter.
Yep.
You know, from measuring the temple to the seventh trumpet, the Ark of the Covenant.
Revelation 11, it's definitely a wild ride.
Yeah, it really is.
Go.
And even though our deep dive is coming to an end, I mean, the conversation doesn't have to stop here, right? Like,
Yeah.
this study guide, it's a great resource.
Oh, it is. Yeah, there's so much good stuff in there.
Yeah. And even linked to other resources like that, the Olive Grove podcast we talked about.
Yeah.
So keep exploring.
Definitely.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe this deep dive will inspire you to, start your own deep dive into other parts of the Bible.
Yeah.
That's what we're all about here on the deep dive, right? Taking a closer look, asking those tough questions, and discovering just how incredible God's Word really is. So thanks for joining us on this journey through Revelation 11. And until next time, keep seeking truth, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep.